Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack one of the absolute most famous success stories of the modern era. We are going to deconstruct the legendary, inspiring tale of Bill Gates. Now, we all know the narrative, right? The brilliant, self-made billionaire who completely changed the world through sheer grit and unmatched intellect. But today, we're actually going to look at the data, the history, and the hidden structures behind that massive success. It is a really fascinating journey, and honestly, it's probably going to completely change how you view achievement.
First off, let's just take a quick second to look at the sheer scale of his success. Bill Gates wasn't just wealthy. He was the absolute wealthiest man in the world for 20 years in a row. Think about that. Even today, he commands a staggering wealth of about $124 billion. It's a level of financial dominance that is frankly almost difficult to even wrap our heads around. So, we've all been taught this very specific, classic inspirational myth. It goes like this. In 1967, an 8th grade Bill Gates discovers computers and immediately starts programming. He's undeniably a genius. I mean, the guy scored a massive 1590 out of 1600 on his SATs before getting into Harvard in 1973. And his work ethic was just intense. He and his friends were actively finding bugs in the Computer Center Corporation systems, literally just so they could get more screen time. They even launched early ventures together like Trafo Data. Then, by 1974, he boldly drops out of college to write software for the Altair 8800, which leads all the way to Microsoft's incredibly successful IPO in 1986. It's the ultimate motivational story. Be super intelligent, work your absolute hardest, take big risks, and you can conquer the world.
Okay, let's dive into this. What if we asked a slightly different question here? What if talent and hard work, well, absolutely necessary for sure, just aren't enough to reach that level of extreme success? I mean, if Bill Gates could do it, why couldn't anyone else with equal talent and equal drive do the exact same thing? Well, to answer that, we really have to look at the invisible factors that were quietly working in the background.
Section 1. The twist of privilege.
Imagine for a second if Bill Gates had been a woman with the exact same 1590 SAT score and the exact same insane work ethic. The reality is, the path would have been completely blocked. During this era in the US, significant gender discrimination wasn't just common, it was codified into society. Banks could literally refuse to give a woman a credit card without her husband's signature. If a woman did the exact same job as a man, she earned roughly 59 cents to his dollar. And perhaps most striking for our whole Harvard dropout story here, almost all Ivy League universities didn't even grant admission to women. Actually, get this, women weren't even allowed to enter Harvard's main library until 1967. Now, let's look at another really striking contrast. What if Bill Gates had been born Black in America during that exact same time frame? Before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Black Americans were legally barred from restaurants, schools, and voting booths in many states. Think about this. In 1968, while young Bill Gates and Paul Allen were safely tucked away in a Seattle lab, writing code and building their skills, the country was in the midst of severe racial segregation and riots, and Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. The societal starting lines weren't just staggered, they were in completely different universes.
Section 2. The demographic lottery.
You know, geography truly is destiny. Bill Gates wasn't just born in America. He was specifically born in Seattle, Washington. And in the 1960s, Seattle was this incredibly rare, highly advanced tech hub. The programming language BASIC was actually invented right there. If a genius kid with the exact same potential had been born in India at that time, they likely wouldn't have even seen a computer before they turned 30, because mass-scale adoption of computers didn't happen there until way after 1985. Just by sheer virtue of his birthplace, Gates was literally decades ahead of brilliant minds born in developing nations.
But wait, even if you were a white male born in Seattle, you still had to win another crazy lottery. Think about this number for a second, 22,000. In 1965, the entire population of the United States was around 200 million people. Out of those 200 million people, there were only about 22,000 computers in the entire country. Gates had direct access to one of the very first commercial systems available simply because he attended Lakeside School, which was an elite private school that everyday middle-class families just simply couldn't afford.
Section 3. Wealth, Access, and Parents.
So dropping out of Harvard is almost always presented as this grand, incredibly courageous risk, right? But we kind of have to look at the safety net beneath that tightrope.
Bill's father was a highly successful lawyer who could provide immense legal help in registering a business, fighting early legal battles, and setting up an office. Compare that to a guy named Monty Davidoff. Monty was brilliant. He actually co-wrote a crucial part of the Altair software right alongside Gates and Paul Allen. But when they offered Monty a permanent job at Microsoft, he had to say no. Why? Because Monty's father owned a small hardware store. He didn't have a massive family wealth reserve to fall back on if the startup failed. He literally couldn't afford the risk of dropping out of college. Risk is just a whole lot easier to take when failure doesn't mean financial ruin.
Section 4. The ultimate inside advantage. And this brilliantly illustrates the power of connections. The famous IBM deal. At the time, IBM desperately needed an operating system, and they were trying to negotiate with a much bigger company called Digital Research. But Bill's mother, Mary Maxwell Gates, served on the board of the nonprofit United Way. And sitting on that exact same board was John Opel, the chairman of IBM. Mary talked to Opel about her son's small company, and thanks to that connection, IBM decided to give Microsoft a chance. But here is the absolute kicker. When Microsoft secured this massive, company-making contract, they didn't even own an operating system to sell. No way, right? They actually had to go out and buy a system called QDOS from Seattle Computer Products, modify it, and then rename it MS-DOS for IBM. That pivotal contract, secured entirely through a parental boardroom connection, changed tech history forever.
Section 5. The privilege blindness trap. Now, right about now, you might be thinking of some counterarguments. When discussing these kinds of advantages, people immediately point to figures like Oprah Winfrey, who rose from poverty to become a billionaire, or Barack Obama becoming US president, or Kalpana Chawla going to space, or Ramnath Kovind, a Dalit, becoming president of India. Don't these incredible people prove that literally anyone can make it from the absolute bottom to the very top? And the answer is yes, these figures absolutely rose from the bottom without those built-in privileges. But the key to understanding this is that they had to work exponentially harder just to clear the massive hurdles that were placed in their way. You know, there's a phrase that brilliantly summarizes this. You can't negate the problems based on exceptions. They are the exceptions, not the rule. Using Oprah to argue that poverty is just a state of mind, or using Obama to argue that racism somehow no longer exists, is a complete logical trap. Acknowledging that someone had an advantage doesn't mean they didn't work hard. Bill Gates worked incredibly hard and possessed immense, undeniable talent. But if we ignore the safety nets, the geographic luck, and the demographic lotteries that cleared his path, we become completely blind to the systemic barriers that hold equally talented people back today. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative question. What are the hidden privileges that helped you reach where you are? Because none of us succeed entirely in a vacuum. Maybe it was a stable home, an early introduction to technology, a chance encounter, or just the era and the city you happened to be born into. Acknowledging our invisible stepping stones doesn't diminish our hard work at all. It simply grounds us in reality, and it helps us build a world where the starting line is just a little more equal for everyone. So think about your own journey today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and always keep questioning the story behind the story.